So the pandemic put a really heavy strain on women in the workplace, to the extent that during COVID, nearly 80% of people who quit their jobs were women. The latest statistics show that 1.8 million fewer women were employed in May of this year when compared to February of 2020. And as more companies start to bring employees back into the office, where does that leave us moms who are working for a living? Well, let's turn to leadership coach and best-selling author Samantha Ettus. She joins us this morning with some advice for women looking to re-enter the workforce. Good morning, Samantha. Good to be with you and good to see you.
Good morning.
Okay, so nearly 2 million women have left the workforce since the pandemic started. What does that say about workplace conditions, especially for working moms?
Well, it says two things. One, it says something about our home conditions because at home, we're not demanding egalitarian relationships. So if you are full partners with your husband, and I say husband because typically this happens in hetero relationships, that the woman ends up taking the childcare hit. But if you have an equal partnership, then you're not the one always making the sacrifices. And unfortunately, if you make even a short-term sacrifice, it has long-term financial impact. At the office, as leaders, I run a company, Park Place Payments, which allows women to have flexibility while earning recurring revenue, because this is such a constant issue for so many women. And I think that when you look at the office as leaders, it's our job to make sure that we are adjusting to the demands of what the current situation is. And right now, it's important that leaders are flexible, and that if your team member needs to work from home 3 days a week, you make it happen. I think if anything in the pandemic, what we have learned is that if you can trust your employee, you don't need to be on top of them in the office all the time.
Well, that sounds great, but I have to stop you here because not a lot of companies are doing that. We are hearing many companies are saying, you need to come back to the office. This is our mandate. This is what is going to happen. Everybody must be in the office. So for many working mothers, they have no choice to work, many of them, right? But re-entering the workforce can be so challenging, especially if they do have to go to that place of employment. You say the first place to start, though, is by owning your brand. How does that help you with this?
Well, one of the most important things you want to exert is I'm a hard worker, right? Because it's very hard to get rid of a hard worker. It's very hard to not adapt your own workplace to a hard worker. So being confident, I call it the 3 C's. If you are confident, if you have conviction, and if you communicate well, you are going to rise to the occasion. That doesn't mean that every single employer is going to respect those qualities in you, but it's really essential that we find workplaces that want us and that are going to adjust to our changing needs as parents. And this impacts working parents, whether they're moms or dads. It's important that workplaces are going to adjust to the changing needs. And while I agree with you, there are certain employers, and there's a lot of employers who are not adapting, there are also a ton of good news stories out of the pandemic of companies that are adjusting, whether it's giant consulting companies or giant corporations. And I think that one of the things we have to do is make sure that our brands are solid. And that means that you have your LinkedIn profile up to date with a professional photo. Even your Facebook shouldn't have your kid's photo as your photo. You want to be seen as a professional in all walks of life.
That's a good point.
Now,
so let me ask you, though, if you can't make that pandemic pivot, right, and move to a new job, a new position that allows you the flexibility, how do you negotiate that flexibility with your current employer?
It's all about communication. And at the end of the day, it costs 1.5 times the amount of a yearly salary, of a monthly salary to replace an employee. And so no employer wants to have to do that. It's very, very hard to replace a valuable employee. And so communicating your needs up front, pre-pandemic, I used to say to women, especially who had this problem, like, your boss is not going to read your mind. And if you're waiting every day to hope to make the 6 o'clock train, that's a very different strategy than saying, unless there's a work emergency, unless there's a deadline, I need to make that 6 o'clock train. So a lot of it is communicating up front. I am not going to be able to come into the office on Fridays, but you can depend on me for the same work product I would have if I were in the office. So a lot of it is taking it head on. But if you are confident and you have conviction about what you need and you communicate communicate, most of the time that conversation will go well.
Well, confidence is also key when undertaking any new endeavor, but especially with a new job. And a good place to start may be using your own network. How do you expand on that network? Because everyone says, it's not always about your skills, it's about your relationships in getting a job sometime, right? So how do you make that work for you?
I think that when people think of networking as a dirty word, they're not understanding that networking is helping. When you help someone, you are basically giving your currency, and that currency will come back to you, not necessarily from the same person, but overall it will. And let me give you an example. If your neighbor is looking for an attorney and you have a friend that works for a law firm, you connect them. If you know someone that is single and you know that these are all methods of networking. So we have to expand what we think of as networking, because every time you help someone, every time you put out there in the world, I would love to help you, you are using a form of your social currency, which ends up being networking. Now, another mistake people make is someone will say to them, so, if they've left the workforce, let's say to raise kids, and they say, what do? They'll say, oh, I'm just at home, I'm a mom, or I'm just at home, I'm a dad. That's one of the worst things you can say, because at the end of the day, someone will only see you as that, even if you're at the playground.
So what do you say instead?
So instead you say, I was in marketing for 10 years and I've taken the last year to be home and I'm going to return. And that gets someone to think of you as more of a three-dimensional person.
Or you could say, I've been a CEO for the last year of my home, managing a household and kids and all that. I know, I gotcha.
Yeah, that's not as well respected in terms of, so we want people to think of us as professional, and we are three-dimensional people, right?
Yes.
We are parents and we are anchors. We do all sorts of things. And I think it's so important that we tell that full story and we give ourselves credit for all of the breadth of experience we've had in our lives.
Good information, Samantha. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And Samantha's book, The Pie Life, a guilt-free recipe for success and satisfaction, is available wherever books are sold.